My name is James Stark. I'm part of Local Initiative Support Corporation. This is the Stop School Violence Specialized Training and Technical Assistance to Advance School-Based CVI approaches. Before we get started, want to acknowledge the support of Bureau of Justice Assistance. Their funding supports this work. Opinions, findings, conclusions, recommendations, all that stuff is those of ours and not necessarily those of BJA or the Department of Justice. As part of housekeeping, just wanted to let you all know if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A tab or add them to the chat. The chat is going to be open. We have two amazing presenters from Spokane, Dr. Oscar Harris and Nicole Rosenkrantz. I had the pleasure of working with them a number of years ago on a pilot program they created called the RISE Mentoring Program, which we're going to be talking about today, which was a very innovative approach to diverting young people that had had some disciplinary behavioral challenges in schools, connect them with, I don't know what we've officially called them, but I think we call them restorative mentors. They're kind of like a jack of all trades, but Oscar and Nicole will tell you a lot more about them. But they were just amazing connectors to the students in the schools to provide help, support, de-escalate, a number of really great opportunities for the students to be able to connect with them in the schools where they were. And so they're going to talk about that program, how it was created, how it was built and supported, where things are now. And then at the end, at the end of the webinar, we're going to have a Q&A that I will facilitate. And then I'm also going to share a little bit about a pilot program that we're going to be creating in 2025. So if this type of work appeals to you and is sounding like something that would benefit your school or your community, please send me an email and we will provide you a little bit more information about this pilot program. So I'll talk about that at the end. So unfortunately, I don't have the bios in front of me. So I'm going to let Dr. Harris and Nicole introduce yourselves, provide your own bios, and kick things off. So Dr. Harris, Nicole, go for it.
Oh, you want to go first?
Nope.
I didn't think so. That's the norm. So first of all, definitely saying hello to all the different individuals who are here with us today. So grateful for LISC and you, James, and everyone who are, I'll say that's in the fight in particular. But yes, Oscar Harris, a little bit about myself, Chief Officer for Spokane Public Schools, specializing in family and community engagement. I've been in the Spokane area for around 30 years now. I am a Southerner, originally out of Arkansas. And so my vernacular will shift over there, and it's a great thing because I love where I'm from and all of that. And so, yes, been working with Spokane Public Schools almost a couple decades and have primarily focused on intervention, prevention, programming that support families. I also have a history of working with community programs, various ones that was around preventing violence and transitioning individuals from the penal institutions back in the community. So that's a little bit about myself.
And hello, I'm Nicole Jenkins Rosenkrantz, and I am the Executive Director of Community Relations and Diversity Training in Spokane Public Schools. So Oscar is the Chief of our Department of Family and Community Engagement, and I'm the Executive Director. I've been at Spokane Public Schools, I think I'm going on 6 years. I often call my first career was Spokane County Juvenile Court, which I was a part of for 17 years. I started as a juvenile corrections officer. When I left, I was the supervisor of our diversion program. And so I hopped over to the school district because I wanted to get more upstream. One of the examples that I talk about is when I was a diversion supervisor, a lot of the cases that were coming across my desk were from Spokane Public Schools, and they were starting criminal history off of normal teenage brain mistakes, as I like to say. And so that started kind of my connection with reaching out to SPS leadership and just trying to find out more about how we could better serve our students and families. And one of the things that we realized is that the schools thought that they were helping kids get the resources they need by referring them to juvenile court. But what they didn't know is juvenile court also uses community resources in order to help students and families. And so when I jumped over here, that kind of became my passion in order to disrupt the school to prison pipeline, was to see what we could do here at Spokane Public Schools.
And I think also adding into it, as we're looking at the slide, a little bit about, you know, the Department of Family and Community Engagement, the history that is associated with it is what is 4 or 5 years ago or more. We pretty much, there was a team of 3 that was supposed to service a school district, which is the second, sometimes goes to third largest school district in the state of Washington at 30,000 students. We was tasked with servicing families, also being in a place, just making it just coming out of the gate, just being full transparent. We was in a place that we was facing a lot of lawsuits, and community relations was in the tank. I mean, there wasn't good relationships and et cetera. And so we were tasked, myself, Nicole, as well as another individual on our team, with being able to develop programming and begin to start managing specific programming that would help us to build better community relations, which was awesome because it got at the core of who we all were. Because many individuals, some of you part of community on the line right now, you're part of community organizations, as well as if you're part of a school district. A lot of stuff that we're going to talk about as far as the challenges, they are pretty germane to school systems in particular, but we had the opportunity to come in, and there was such strategic movements that was happening at that time that afforded us the opportunity to really do some innovative programming, which we're going to keep talking about. And RISE just so happened to be one of those.
So if you look at the areas that our department covers, we pretty much are the safety net for the populations that can usually be seen as the pushouts. And so we support students with whole two generation mentoring, means not just the students, but their families, because no matter what resources we give them in the schools, of course, they're going to go back into the community and to their homes. And so we really want to support supporting the whole child and the whole family. And so we get to know their family members very well and see what their needs are. Sometimes we've even helped parents get jobs and, help with their income. The other piece Oscar did mention, we started as a very small department, and right before this meeting, I sent out an all staff meeting. So we started with 3 and now we're at 27. And so this has been a very exciting journey. And so we're looking forward to sharing more with you.
Cool.
Okay. So, in talking about how RISE came to be, so RISE is restorative intervention to suspensions and exclusions. So when I talked about, I came from juvenile court. So when I first got here, I was meeting with who's now our superintendent. He wasn't the superintendent at the time. And I was telling him that I heard that Georgetown University had this in-school diversion program to learn how to, where we could learn how to develop something with fidelity in our school. And his response to me was, well, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, but we don't have any money to send anyone. So just, if you can find a grant. So what I didn't tell him was I already had an organization that had a grant that was going to send a group of us there. So we had a couple school staff. Again, it's very important to have community involved from the very beginning. And so we also had someone from the NAACP, the vice president. We had someone from Team Child, which is a child advocacy organization, and someone from juvenile court. And so we all went together and spent a week together and really learned how to build this program. And so then when we came back, we decided, okay, so now we have the nuts and bolts, but how do we get community buy-in and get family support so that we can do this in a way that is helpful, that we're not doing to, but we're doing with, building with. And so we had lots of family listening sessions and community meetings, and then using our data, we were able to see what type of program we want to develop, what we wanted to focus on. And so after that, we were able to apply for a 3-year federal grant. And so with that grant, we hired 3 full-time school community specialists, is what we call them, but they're specialized mentors, and then also a supervisor, which we call the district diversion liaison. and we placed at 5 of our comprehensive high schools. So with one thing that's important about our department that we always talk about is that we are still very much involved in the community. So we have 1 foot in the community and 1 foot in the schools. And again, we're the bridge to build relationships. Next. And so with that, what we were able to do, so again, as I mentioned, talking to the person who's a superintendent now, I was telling him everything that's done at juvenile court in diversion can be done in the school system. And so this is an example of what a RISE agreement looks like. It's very similar to a diversion agreement with juvenile court. And so we provide this in order to prevent or lessen the amount of time for an in-school suspension or out-of-school exclusion. And so sometimes we use this, sometimes there's an emergency expulsion where things need to be investigated, but our team is able to come alongside the principals and the families and decide, okay, so what needs to be in place in order for us to feel safe that the student can come back? So is there mental health resources that need to happen, our evaluations? Is there restorative intervention such as the 2 students need to come together or a student and a teacher needs to come together? And then we also, not all of the youth decide to be on the caseload, but the other thing is we do specialized mentoring where our mentors are in the school and they're able to connect with them. So help them as they come back into the school building, and then as they restore and redevelop relationships, we're able to walk alongside them for that, as well as one-on-one just connections with them. And so they have these meetings with them every week, and we use the evidence-based check and connect model. So connect is when they need the deeper interaction. As they start doing better and kind of just need a quick check-in, then we just do the quick check-ins, but we keep them on our caseload so that they know that they have a place of safety. So as far as the referral process, I didn't realize it would be so small on my screen, so I'm going to keep leaning in. Sorry about that. So a referral can be made by administrators or counselors. And so what that is just, this is the student, this is what's going on, this is why we need support. And then we are able to look them up in PowerSchool, which is where they carry everything, their grades and behavior information. And with that, we're able to match mentors to mentees. And then a connection is made. And then from there, again, we continue doing support and we follow up with them.
Okay. So in terms of looking at the unique mentors that we have, one thing that I call them in particular is cultural brokers, as well as individuals who broker resources for families as well as a student. So those are different things that we're looking at. Being a department that we oversee, oftentimes the most critical type programs, I would say, within a school district that's serving the children that's probably closest to violence, such as the ones that are more truant, as well as the ones that's kind of disconnected, and some that's really not able to access certain resources, like we said, vital documents, undocumented students, various other type of things that come into play that put our kids at risk. Our mentors become, we talked about actually changing the name because of who they are and what they do. They do so much more than what people would say within some of the popularized mentoring type program, just a one-on-one visit. As a case, one program that's attached to our programming that I think is part of the evolution, I'll give an example. A few weeks ago, Nicole, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, that was an actual student, and this is real and right in front of us, who brought a firearm to school. And upon bringing the firearm to school, he turned out to show one student, and the one student he showed was a student that our team worked with. That student, even though their mentor, they had moved, transitioned to the next level of school, middle school, that student went out of their way to make sure they told their mentor, who was not even connected to them, and we was able to come in and really, and I think the student was also one that had been on another caseload. And so we was able to come in and interface and mobilize very quickly and end up changing the situation around so much to where, you know, it was quick response. And what it pointed to was the value of having RISE mentors who can work directly with the families, who can also work with the students, because the person who reported, mom immediately reached out to mentors, reached out to the mentors who were like, hey, I am concerned about retaliation because my child is the one who told. And so we was able to have our mentors also work with families. I think that's a key component. Our mentors being those cultural brokers, trusted messengers, different individuals, not only have lived experience, but they have training that allows for them to work with the families in such a way to where they come in and they're invited to a lot of interesting things. They're invited to birthday parties, various things, and that's I think that's the positive side of it. I can tell you they also go to the hospital. I mean, they also will attend funerals. They also are very much ingrained, and these are our mentors who do it for the love of it. Because I would love to say they're getting paid. What's the terminology? Buku bucks, but they ain't getting paid buku bucks, right? They're coming and we're doing the best that we can. And for the love of the community and love of the people, they're really moving forward and really supporting. So we're very appreciative of what our mentors do in terms of walking tandem, hand in hand with our community members and all of that, helping them through the truancy process and all these other elements that's before you.
Okay, so one of the amazing pieces of this program is, I'm not sure if I don't think I mentioned it, but we're focused on tier 2 and tier 3 behavior. So tier 1 would be all students in the school. Tier 2 would be starting to have some behaviors that might lead to suspensions and expulsions, might start being a little, they might be showing some at-risk behaviors. And then tier 3 is more the re-engagement stage, you know, when they're coming back into school after coming out of juvenile court or any type of other system. So these mentors focus on tier 2 and tier 3 students. And so a lot of them were not set to graduate. And so because we were able to follow them for 3 years, this is what's on your screen is some text messages for our seniors that graduated. And so in this 3-year pilot, all seniors referenced in this program, 95% referred graduated. And so we were just so proud of that piece. And then also they've still stayed connected. So our mentors are still getting updates about how they're doing. If they need resources, some actually went on to community college. And so asking about which classes they should take, or, you know, if something's going wrong in their community college class, you know, asking for some help. And so I think it's been great to see this has not just impacted them in their time in Spokane Public Schools, but also as they head into adulthood, which again is our dream, right?
Absolutely. And looking at, I think, a very important component when it came to the RISE program, and I did see the question in terms of what RISE stands for. It stands for Restorative Interventions, and I say in lieu of suspension and expulsion, meaning that we're trying to work program to keep students in school versus them leaving, because mostly everyone knows that just because you suspend a student, it does not eliminate a threat. And matter of fact, it may exacerbate it, given what's happening around the data and the research. But something that we looked at as far as prioritizing RISE and stuff out of the gate, and Nicole, you can speak on this even more, was definitely data. But Nicole, I'm gonna pass it to you because you being right there intimately involved.
Yeah. So on the slide, there is a misspeak. 3 out of 6 middle schools. So we have another RISE program going right now that's middle school, but we're talking about the high school one. So please disregard that. Okay, so data-driven school prioritization. So what we did was we looked at the schools that had the highest suspension and expulsion rate, and then also the highest disproportionality. Those were the schools that we decided to really focus on. And wildly, and I say wildly because it's something that I never expected, we don't have disproportionality in our discipline currently. And I didn't really know that we would ever get there. Like, of course, that's always the dream, and we always say all the big things that that's the goal. And so I'm sorry, in regards to special education, we still do, but as far as race and ethnicity, we don't.
Mhm.
Okay, so next slide, please.
Yeah, and I think, Nicole, is worth mentioning that, before RISE program, we were African American students was it 4 times or 2 times?
4 times.
Four times more likely to be suspended and expelled from schools. And so our state actually came up with a metric in terms of being able to calculate if you got disproportionality across race, across ethnic groups, as well as when it comes down to whether you have a 504 IEP. And again, I'll say it's something, some people say miraculous. I'll say something that was intentional since we focused on it. Being able to eliminate that disproportionality across that was something that, we still process how did it happen. And I still will go back to through intentional effort, really working with community organizations, community partners. And I think listening, and making sure we elevated the voices of families and youth. I think if I really had to get to it as a simplistic way, I would say that is one of the things that did it. Okay.
Yes, we definitely have to build with, not for.
Mhm.
We've been told that over and over and over again. And so again, it's not build this program and then say, hey, community, what do you think about it? They need to be at the table alongside of us. And then I always say students know exactly what they need. So why wouldn't we have their expertise at the table? And so along with the individual mentoring, as the caseload started getting bigger and bigger, we didn't want to turn away students. And so we started talking about how do we do group mentoring as well. And so we had girls groups. We actually tailored support to different issues, again, using student voice, what they brought up, what they would like to have groups for. And with that, we found that the schools that we were in were actually very supportive of this as well, because what they saw was the students that they were having the hardest time with, they were no longer having the hardest time because they felt belonging and connection, and that's exactly what they need.
So next we can talk about program outcome data. So after running our pilot program and coming to the end, there was a few things that we saw that we definitely celebrate in terms of the program. So starting out, our reach and our emissions over time, looking at 2019, 2023, we served, various youth. But you would notice at a particular time, July through December of 2020, and January through June of 2023, those were unique times. I think something that also came into play, we know that we're in the midst of the pandemic, right? When you look at the first numbers, and if anything, we noticed increases in our programming because of that. And our mentors needed to be even more flexible and mobile given what was happening across the nation with the pandemic. So that's something that we're yet looking at and thinking about. Also, I think to the data point, both short-term, long-term offending rates went to 0 with no arrest as well as juvenile commitment. And I'll say that if I had to, I can't say it's definitely a cause directly because in research terminology, but I can say is without saying that many of the youth had trusted adults that they can go to, additional trusted adults they could go to, and those adults was able to not just navigate the system for them, but was able to broker the proper resources to help them so they can be successful. Because oftentimes, everybody on the call already knows it, many of our family are dealing with one-off type stuff. And what I mean one-off type stuff, they're not coming to school, and sometimes they're embarrassed to even talk about them coming to school, right? We're in an era to where, this is not as much in the Pacific Northwest, but being from the South, this was very common, and I know other areas it was common, but students being highly conscientious of their appearance, right? Are they wearing the latest and greatest? Are they wearing those J's? What do they have going on? Are they going to come to school and be teased or bullied from their peer group because of what's happening within the cultures that surround them? And so having people who can go in those spaces and really support them have been something that we found a great value. And some of them, I'm saying offline, probably did buy some J's, but Nicole and I both are sometimes in a place where we're like, hey, please, some stuff don't tell us. I mean, please don't tell us, right? We just do that. Just don't tell us. Okay,
Yes.
next. And we also saw behavior changes, and there was also changes around attendance. Being a department that oversee attendance, we noticed, we get to see it, and many to most school districts are dealing with truant type behaviors they're trying to find solutions for. I believe that by coupling programs such as this with your attendance teams within schools, with bringing community partners even in closer, you can begin to start really honing in and making changes that are necessary, because certain information is not even getting to the schools or getting to people that could be beneficial to a family. One particular case I have is that there was a young student who was not come to school was very late most of the time, and finally, through having a trusted individual talk with them, they shared the reason why they were not coming to school or they was extremely late is because their neighbor or person on their block let their dog off the leash and let them run in the yard, and they was terrified to go by that yard. And so being able to get that information, having individuals we mobilize to go to them and say, hey, this is the deal. We got young kiddos, middle-aged kiddos who are terrified to come by your yard. Can you keep your dogs in within this period of time? That would be helpful for us. And they consented to it. And from what I understand, and then it ended up leaning itself to the person, attendance improved. But how often are we hearing about those types of things in the system, right? Sometimes we got multi-generational families who've dealt with high levels of trauma, and they don't want to share their story just one more time, right? They just tired of different things. Also, something that was cool from the pro-social behaviors that was offered through the program, through the RISE mentoring program, we also saw improvements in behavior changes that took place. Through the programming, you had individuals like Rebecca Lawson's individuals who connect with the program, and Nicole, who went out of their way to connect with community partners to bring in additional resources that families could not access, such as being able to have access to a Y membership, being able to have access to culturally relevant groups. I think, Nicole, you brokered one relationship with a community partner who put rap to people life stories or something as a pro-social behavior. All of these things began to start contributing to the success that the program have. And something that comes into place, it also, when you begin to start pairing these type of programs with other things that are happening in the school, you will see impacts in the community as well as additional impacts that are happening within schools. For example, even within schools, we have frameworks. And different things that are being used around behavior. Many of you may have heard of the PBIS, RTI, or one of those. But when you pair those programs with mentors to get even, those programs are designed to collect data around what may be causing behavior challenges for students and stuff. But when you bring in the mentoring program, RISE elements, it adds more to the picture. And with a more complete picture, you can come up with interventions and strategies that can be more effective. Also, one thing that we was able to do is bring in conflict resolution type of services to the program that helped out a lot, as well as partner with some of our local community organizations, our NAACP chapter, as well as our SNAP program, which provide housing resources, food resources, and etc. And all of these things begin to start contributing to the outcome that we see with the RISE program. Okay, the program youth new admissions, we saw the highest admission during the pandemic time. I've said that in particular. And then even at going into pandemic, we had others to come in the program. Something that I'm processing right now that was kind of cool and different at the same time. Upon starting these programs, we had the ideal that young adults wouldn't be interested in experiencing this type of program. And we was wrong. we actually began to start having this. We piloted the program with middle school, but we had high schools reaching out, high schoolers wanting to connect with mentors and everything. So that was an interesting phenomenon that we wasn't expecting, because often we think once they get a certain age, they're hands off. And I think that that's something that we're starting to really process right now, that our kids and our students yet need us even at those older ages and all of that, because it ain't like they got life figured out. Well, maybe they do. I venture to say I still don't have life figured out. So, hey, maybe. So, yes, but we had a total intake of 289 new admissions, for the program during the pilot. School attendance improvement, 100% improvement rate when you begin to start looking at our students. In total, 440 students showed improvement in attendance. Economically, I could talk about that later. School districts that get paid on a per pupil rate and stuff, that means a lot of money right there coming into a school system, so you can bring about even better interventions, even more interventions, innovative interventions that can really support families. What got at the improvement in attendance? We all know it. People go where they feel alone. They feel like people want them there. They feel loved, and there's a sense of belonging that is there. We have a saying in our department, and it's from one of our members, Chauncey Jones. You go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. So we work on those types of things and trying to make sure that our students know that they're going to come to a place to be celebrated. Behavior changes. You're looking at January through June 2022, 127, 77% demonstrated improvements in that pro-social behavior. And July through December of 2021, 68 improvement rate. Pro-social behavior, getting our students involved in different activities that's going to help give them exposure, not just in the immediacy to life, but it gives them exposure to potential careers, as well as it teaches them additional outlets that may exist so they don't have to do what they're doing. Many of you on here have worked with students who are close to a gang, affiliated gang, and all those different types of things. These things become critical to being able to provide other opportunities for our students and families. I'm saying students and families. So, yes. Okay, next. All right, Nicole.
Okay, so family and community engagement, we talked about this quite a bit. That is key for replication. What we found is one of the things that was great about having them with us as we were building was then when there may have been someone that wanted to attack the program, whether it was in the school or in the community, they were actually our biggest defenders. And so that relationship and them being part of building it really made a big difference, as well as also building together from the beginning helps with illuminating any blind spots. And then shared responsibility for failures and success. So blind spots, an example is our program is called RISE. In the beginning, I was just calling it in-school diversion. And then we had families who were just as involved, who were very much triggered by calling it a diversion program because they were tying it again to the court process. And so we really had to think about, okay, so how do we change that? And it wasn't a big problem to change it, but it was just, again, something that I wouldn't, so I'm like, well, diversion means diverting out of the system. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, what matters is how they feel, from the very beginning, so they want to be a part of this. And then again, imagine mentors calling families to let them know we're going to work with your child, and this is a diversion program, again, triggering a response about court involvement. The other piece, so data must be analyzed to fully understand the opportunity for innovation. So again, that's what's going to show us where we should be working on and pushing on. And again, like, we figured out which schools we were going to based on the data of their exclusions. And so how did we want to help walk alongside them in order to combat this? And then also remembering that the success of the students is always the North Star. And so this work is heavy. There'll be disagreement on strategies. But if the students remain the focus and the anchor, anything is possible. And I find that in a lot of times, even if maybe an administrator doesn't agree with the way that we want to go, sometimes we reset the meeting with, okay, who are we here for? We're here for the student and the family. And our schools belong to the community. And because of that, how can we set this student and family up for success? So always remembering the North Star. So good days, bad days, just know you're in the fight for the kids.
No, absolutely. And the other piece, James, even while we're transitioning, when it comes to family and community engagement, I am a huge, not just a huge advocate, but I talk about family and community engagement frameworks for the purpose of making sure that you can not have a checklist, but making sure that you can include all relevant stakeholders, because everybody who's on the line on the call right now is doing amazing work. I know without a shadow of a doubt, you're doing amazing work. Something that can happen is that this work is so hard that you can become siloed so quick and be like, I'm doing A, B, and C. And sometimes if you're outside of the system, school system, the system have a hard time understanding what you do, no matter how many times you explain it, and they still have a hard time of what you're doing. That's why it becomes important to include all stakeholders, because the point Nicole said that I think is also key is that when you have community families, community organizations who's advocating for your program, it makes a difference. We have a school board that is very much so behind what we're doing right now. If they wasn't, we have community reps, families who would be at the school board meeting saying, this is the deal. We don't know why you're not doing programs like this. We don't want to ever see an arrest rate among students in school go up like it was in years prior to all this happening. So we need to figure this out. And so that can be something that helps you in the future. Just want to make sure I put that out there just as a pointer. Okay. RISE programming and implementation. Cool. All right, Nicole, is this me or you?
So we go back and forth on the steps. I'm step one. Okay.
Perfect.
As far as assessing school readiness, so I use the phrase readiness to benefit. And with that means that there may be some schools that you try to interact with that do not have the readiness for benefit.
Yep.
And what that means is, oh no, I've got it. Yeah, our discipline rates are this, but I've got it figured out. And or they may agree to have you come in, your staff come in, but then they don't really give them the space and the resources to be able to actually do the programming that they're there to do. They may all of a sudden be stuck watching a in-school suspension classroom. So again, that is not a school that has the readiness to benefit.
Absolutely.
And so again, having them at the table in the beginning and really building together. I'm seeing what the school building needs, but that also makes sure that your program can be to fidelity. So assessing school readiness is the first step.
No, absolutely. And being able to look at step 2, setting up core partnerships. And when we say core partnership, we're saying, who is it going to be critical for you to have at the table for you to be successful with a programming? And this involves, yes, schools, this involves community organizations of some types, and definitely families. You want to have them in the midst, because what you're going to discover is that some stuff you can't build it after the program is going. Recommendation to make sure you have mental health providers there at the table, other certain advocacy groups, local law enforcement or EMT responders, different people who you would have at the table to where there'll be a potential that you're going to interface with at some given point. Because the more that you have individuals buy in up front, when a situation happens to where you're going to need to call not just in favors, but you're going to need to be able to better understand some other system, they're going to be more apt to help you. For example, I said mental health services. Within Spokane Public Schools, we have mental health providers in schools, but within the community, we also have mental health providers, but the wait list could be, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, a year. They have triage systems sometimes to where you have to hit a critical level before you see someone. And so what we do instead, by inviting someone in early and they're sitting at your planning table, they're sitting there with you, they're going to know their system. They can push buttons that you won't be able to push that possibly can get your student or get your family raised up as far as the priority as necessary. Or at the very least, they can bring someone in to coach you and your team on some of the stuff that you can do that while you're waiting for them to be seen.
Yes, so training staff and mentors, step 3. So knowing what the requirements are for their position, using models like Check and Connect. Again, that's an evidence-based model. Walking them through how to handle conflict resolution, whether it's between helping them navigate how to speak to school administrators, how to speak for families, but not in a way where you're alienating school administrators who have invited you into the school. So it is a delicate balance of a relationship, again, with one foot in the community and one foot in the schools. And then mentorship skills. So how do they connect with students? And then also restorative practices. So again, how do we bring folks back together when harm has occurred? The other thing we have found and known that we want you to know that you can't train for everything. We've had some very interesting examples come up where we're like, well, I guess we'll add that to the training for next time. So just know you want to really focus on the health and safety and boundaries, and those pieces are very important. And also know there will be some one-off things that you've never even imagined could occur that will occur, and that's okay.
So Nicole and James, I'm gonna have to apologize. A thought came to mind, and I'm gonna have to say it. You be careful when you're training around stupidity. Something that's just stupid. You got to be careful. And I'll give an example. I'm gonna give an example to qualify it. I'm gonna give an example. James is like, oh Lord, who we got on the line now? So some things I say are stupid or asinine is some basic human care and human dignity type stuff. You know, should we, a family just experienced a death in their family, should we call them and talk to them about being absent? Come on now, let's not even go there. That's if you think internally, would you ever want someone to call you if you was connected to your family or something? So don't even do that, right? Because sometimes individual, just human nature, if we ain't careful, we'll let our processes get in the way of us being present with humans. And that's something we have to constantly balance, right? Being the one that's in the community and then the school, because again, me empathizing, people have jobs to do, but you can always be kind and compassionate. Thank you, James, for not getting on me too much. You got a look on your face that we'll talk about it later if necessary. Next, moving to the next thing, developing data-driven goals. Something that I would say when it comes down to programming like this is becoming even more critical to look at your qualitative and your quantitative data. Oftentimes with these programs, we have the testimonials from the students and from the families, which is great, but we need to make sure we allow for that to complement how effective this program is. How many students are you seeing improvement in attendance? How many students are you seeing improvements when it comes to behavior metrics as well as academic metrics? That way, what it does, it puts you into a place to where you can give a more balanced story, to where you can say that, hey, I want to let you know that this is really having this impact on so many levels. And when it comes down to funding and various other things, it sets you up and you get a chance to really get a clearer picture, more accurate picture of how successful your program is. So I have to make sure I recommend that you have robust data-driven goals that's connected to it.
Step 5, implementation timeline. So one of the things that I found when I have talked to sites, a lot of times they're worried about the buy-in from the very beginning because they wrote this grant and we said we're going to do all of these things and we're not able to do these things because the school's not quite bought in yet. And so what I try to tell folks is so we had a 3-year grant. Our first year was really getting schools used to who we are and what we were offering. We had a little bit of a bump because of COVID. They really needed people to go and do home visits and all of those things. But had we not had that, I think that it would have been a lot slower than it was. The other piece is We found that in this first year, they're all about the mentoring part of the program, so referring kids for mentoring. But then when it came to doing RISE agreements, to not exclude them right away or to bring them back early, they weren't quite sure if they really wanted to do that. And so we really didn't. So what we did was we really focused on developing relationships. And so that first year really is a developing relationships piece. So we did a lot of mentoring that first year. And then the second year, we started pushing more on the RISE agreements once we had the relationship in place. And then I can say once the grant was over, we completed year 3, the schools that didn't have that weren't going to have the RISE program moving forward were very concerned about, well, how do we keep this going? This is very important. And sorry, it took us so long to get on board, but now we're on board, and and so again, just giving yourself the grace to know that it does take time. And yes, you do have grant reports, but also I'm going to venture out to say that grantors also know that it's a process. And so really work on developing those relationships. That's the key point. And so just know it took us to get to year 2 to do that. James, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm taking my point of privilege here is the moderator to also jump in. And Oscar, you always have carte blanche with me. You're good. But in the beginning of the webinar, I was talking about the pilot where we're going to have opportunities to provide a limited number of sites with some specialized TA, and this is kind of the steps that Nicole and Oscar are going to be working with you on. And I think the important thing is to hear what Nicole was saying. This is sometimes it's a 3-year process. So this specialized TA, like, we're not going to be implementing a program in your school right away. Nicole and Oscar are going to help you get your school ready. Understand who the partner should be, how are you going to hire your mentors, what data you're going to try to capture. Also, the other part is the sustainability. So, like, what grants are we going to apply for that's going to be able to support this work? So Oscar and Nicole are going to be walking through these steps with you, so that by the end of that process, you have a good plan in place to start to think about when and which schools you're going to be implementing this. So I just wanted to chime in right there real quick. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that actually tied it up perfectly. So,
yes. So step 6, you kind of talked a little bit about, program execution a little bit. And so perfect segue, James, and being able to talk about, those particular things. I think one thing that I add to this, Nicole, and you can add some as well, is that having role clarity, that's another thing that you're going to want to look at, even when it comes to mentorship. Role clarity around what it looks like to mentor, even beyond the one-on-one sessions, because eventually getting to so something that happened in school, and many of you are familiar with this, is that, and I share this, I say at the end of the day, always pay attention to what's the core mission of an organization. And if you cover that, you'll never find yourself in too much controversy or too many challenges. Many to most schools, they're geared toward that didactic instruction, teaching kids and seat time. And so when a mentor comes in and is able to help nurture that relationship, as well as help to improve the academic outcomes and the social emotional well-being of the students' outcome, that's a win-win. And it's easier for a lot of schools to sign in, even when you approach them. Being able to say that, yes, we're going to do violence prevention that's going to have an academic impact, we can guarantee you, right? Which it will. Many to most of you are already probably seeing this happening, but it will. And so, yeah, so while you're executing the program, that's one piece that I would put in there.
Yeah, and I think a couple examples of the academic piece is there would be homework groups. So part of what the mentors would check in with them on is they would go through Power School with them and look at their missed assignments and help them with making up those assignments. The other thing was teaching them advocacy skills. And so showing them how to email their teacher to ask for extra time or for some a special instruction, or if I turn in these parts of my assignment, will this help me pass? And then I have the example that always makes me laugh is that we had one mentor who went back to algebra class. Now you can pay me $50 million, $100,000 to go back to algebra class, but our mentor went back to algebra class, and because he had a handful of mentees that were in that class that were struggling, and he began to have an unofficial bet over snacks if he could get higher grades on the tests than them. And that teacher loved that. And so much, it actually raised the grade of all of the students in the class, because even though they weren't on his caseload, all the students became really engaged in that. And so his students did pass, and then also, again, elevated other students. And so, yeah, it's always innovative, thinking outside the box. Now, there's another mentor that would not be so good at doing that. So again, when you're hiring mentors, really thinking about what they're bringing to the team. Oscar uses the phrase surfacing your brilliance. And so what is their brilliance that they're bringing to the team? And it's not all going to be cookie cutter. And that's what you want. You want puzzle pieces that you can put together to make the perfect puzzle.
Absolutely. Definitely. So the continuous monitoring and feedback component, how do you evaluate your program? That's getting into that quantitative, qualitative type metrics you're looking at. I say it comes from multiple sources of data. One is definitely, what is the school saying about your program? First of all, let me back up. What is the student saying about your program? Their caregiver saying about your program. What is the student, what is the school saying about your program? And what are community partners saying about your program? All of those can be that real informal survey data that you can have. And then on top of that, you're going looking at attendance data. You're going looking at behavior data, right? You're going looking at academic data, and all of those types of things is something that you're going to look at. And your mentors are trained to be looking at those things. While they're looking at the social emotional type things, trying to make sure they're looking out for mental wellness, they're also saying, okay, how are you improving in these particular areas? Because we know at the end of the day, we want you not just to have a feel-good experience, but we need to help you and equip you for life beyond this school experience, because you're going somewhere after this. So that's something that I'll say when it comes down to the continuous monitoring. The other piece is use the feedback. I think something that Nicole and, we talk about, and definitely with me, is feedback. I take feedback as feedback. That's at the end of the day. You can share feedback, but you got to have more information. You can't say the program is crap, then I just tune you out totally. But if you come and you say that, hey, how your mentors are engaging, pulling students at critical time, and they're pulling students from the class they're having the most difficulty in, and all of those things, and the school is talking about, hey, what about remedial services? And so talking with a mentor, being able to say that, hey, we got a report, you're pulling them at a real critical time. And so a win-win situation is possibly pull them, but can you also broker tutoring services? So when they go back into the class, they're going to be in the place not further behind what's going on in those cases. And do we need to, in some instances, how's the relationship between them and the teacher? Because we know also, if sometimes our students are amongst educators that they don't gel with because of some kind of personality thing or something, I don't know. We as people just weird sometimes, right? All of us are guilty. If that is the case, how do we back up and say that, hey, we need to put them with a proper fit and help the adult to understand that they can't take this stuff personal, right? It's not a personal attack if a student say, I don't vibe with you. It's okay. Let them go about their business. So a mentor can actually begin to start working this thing, but you have to have feedback mechanisms in place, because you want to hear what people are saying about the program, because that's going to tell you what's going on, because we know that the feedback is going to go across our school district, and it only takes a few schools, and I'm just being, transparent. It only takes a few schools to take a false report from someone before administrators start to become very resistant to what you're trying to do.
Well, and that's the other piece of why relationship is so important. So there should be regular check-ins with the building leader as well. So whether it's once every 3 months, but also if something really does come up, just reach out and we can get something on the calendar. But again, relationship. And I found that in a positive way, really, all principals talk to each other. And so we have folks that we weren't originally in their schools who reach out to us and say, hey, how can we get this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So
So,
reviewing and scaling the program, Nicole, it's interesting. We're at this point right now. You want to talk about that?
so one of the things that we have done is, so this one that we're talking about was high school age. And so right now we have moved into middle school. And it has been interesting just in the sense that obviously middle school kids and high school kids are different. Um, and then also we chose that because looking at our data, again, data-driven decisions, most of our suspensions and expulsions were out of middle schools. And so we have used our lessons learned from the previous program in order to develop how we're going to move forward this in this iteration. The other way is the other thing I want to talk about as far as scaling up is really, again, although we started with the money from the grant, being able to talk about schools now that we have the buy-in, what part of your budget can you also contribute to this program? So we'll continue to go for grants, but how do we braid funding? And so this is a shared responsibility.
Yep. I think, Nicole, we can't overemphasize, I think, that piece. Because I'll tell you a tradition that happens that in public education, as I know of, is that you get a grant, buildings pretty much have their budget totally allocated to other things. You get a grant, and as that grant is coming to an end, they're not in a place to where they can pivot and shift monies. So I recommend out of the gate definitely having a grant. But like Nicole did it, constantly telling the school, this is the deal. This is a 3-year grant or however long. And by year 4, can you see yourself allocating some of your general fund to this building? In most cases, they're going to say yes, because they're like, hey, I want the resource. And if they see the success, which is going to happen, right? Typically, a lot of individuals that's in this work truly are in it because this is their passion. So they get levels of success constantly anyway. And so when you find yourself as time go along, they're going to be talking to you. Okay, I understand that. Yeah, I will have to school building. I will have to come and fund a potential position. Oh, I may not have the complete amount, but I have this amount. Will that do? And I'll definitely say yes. Something else that I can tell you that's a goal of mine and Nicole, and we go back and forth on this. I like to work with our staff to where buildings want to absorb them totally, make them their staff. It don't lend itself for us having long-term rides, but guess what? That's one of my goals where I want them to covet our staff. So much so, and we have that happening. It's kind of funny. Sometimes instead of coming to Nicole and I, they'll go directly to the staff. And of course the staff tells us every time. And I say things like, hey, what kind of money they offered you? Oh, if they offer you the right money, you better go with it.
The other interesting thing, just in full transparency, there was a couple schools who decided that, oh, they weren't going to allocate their budget. And Oscar said to me, he said, just watch. And I'm over here with my heart breaking, like, I can't believe they were in love with our program and I can't believe they're not going to put funding. And so we gave them 1 school year and they're begging for us to come back and throwing money at us. And so again, like it ebbs and flows. It doesn't always go exactly how we plan, but I find that relationship, and I'm going to say that over and over and over, relationship. That's the key to, that's how we really get the seeds planted and the roots going and growing, is using that piece.
And also on that piece, Nicole, before we go into questions, I think something that I want to clarify is that just because school districts sometimes can't offer money or not offering money, I wouldn't let that be a major deterrent, or neither would to our community partners, people who are working on here that's not in school, use it as some type of rubric or feedback that your program is not valuable or they don't value you. That's something that I would put out there, after knowing some school budgets and all of that and just how everything works. It really is a timing thing. It's a timing thing as well as a few other types of components that goes into it. And so those are things we love to help out with, at least having conversations so you can project out, because so many individuals start program and just hoping that the school is going to take it on. But in many to most cases, the school don't take it on. So. Cool.
All right. Well done, Oscar and Nicole. We have about a half an hour for questions and answers.
Hmm.
I'm gonna take it off the screen for right now. I'm gonna put it back on a little bit later. Um, but in the interim, I would say anybody who has question for Oscar and Nicole, either raise your hand and I will help take you off mute so you can ask the question, or you can throw it in the chat bar. I'm gonna kick things off. First, I loved what Chauncey said. You have to go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. And I think, walking the schools of Spokane, that was one of the things I was most impressed with. You had a culture in your schools where students were clearly celebrated. The principals, even had, the funny handshakes, the secret handshakes with like a whole number of students.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you even like? I can't remember things, and you got a handshake with just about everybody in the school. That's amazing. Um, so kind of building off of that, your team, this culture comes from a lot of it comes from your team. So what is it that you look for during the hiring process for your Rise mentors?
Okay,
Let's see.
Nicole.
Yes. We need to see a passion for kids, obviously, an understanding of equity. And so one of our district motto is excellence for everyone through equity. And so one of our interview questions is, how do you see yourself furthering this work? Uh, for excellence for everyone through equity in your position. And so we get a lot of great answers, and you're able to see that they really understand what equity means and about meeting the student where they're at and building what success looks like together. And so that is very beneficial. The other piece that we do is we give them scenarios, and the reason why we give them scenarios is not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but it's to see the thought process. And so we want to know if you can methodically think out how to handle a situation that you may not have ever experienced before. And let's see, Oscar, what else would you think?
A couple things I'm thinking about. The perfect a balance, as much as possible, getting a balance in terms of the personality type you're bringing in, and keeping in mind finding people who's going to be credible messengers or cultural brokers. It's difficult within itself, given them having histories and backgrounds, but being intentional about making sure that you can find as much of a balance as possible. I'm kind of smiling, laughing, saying that you don't get them to burn the system down. When you coach them a little bit further before they come in. Don't you're gonna no, you don't burn it. The system been around a long time. It done burned a lot of people up silently and passively and all of that. So that'll be one thing that I'll look at. So if you find someone who's a prospect who has high level of trauma, being able to help them do their own personal work first. Because inevitably that's something that we have seen before. Sometimes even Nicole or myself will redirect some of our staff because they'll come in and they will be all into such an advocacy level and all of that, and figure that they got to save the kids. We don't need saviors. We need people who are going to be present, who's going to be able to navigate the system and educate families and students on how to navigate the system. So yeah, that's why I look at it. You get that, you can kind of, I can say Nicole and I kind of, we know what kind of vibes. We good at discerning vibes. I've been off before, and she reminds me when we hire someone who's not a good fit. She was like, Oscar, remember I told you? I was like, yeah, you did.
Yeah. Um, the other piece that I think of, one of the things I talk about, there's nothing wrong with being an activist and there's nothing wrong with being an advocate.
Yep.
If you're going to work in the system, you need to be more of an advocate because you're going to have to be able to help the families navigate the system. And if you're not able to navigate the system, how are you going to help families navigate? The other piece that we talk about is it does sometimes come at a personal sacrifice. I can't
Yes.
tell you how many times Oscar and I had some hard things in the community where we have to remind folks that even though we work for a system, we are actually community members, right? And so again, it is heavy work. And so just again, keeping that in mind when you're bringing folks in.
Mhm.
All right, I'm going to keep asking questions until I see questions from the guests, because I always have 100 questions. Just some technical questions. Give us a lay of the land of the Spokane school system. So, you said that your original RISE program focused on high school. Can you tell me, how many high school students are there approximately in Spokane? How many high schools there are in Spokane, and just on a yearly basis, about how many students did the RISE program support?
So I'm going to say the RISE program part, and Oscar can talk about those the global piece.
Okay.
And so what we do is we make sure, and again, it's research-based, evidence-based, that you don't want one mentor with more than 25 students. And again, one way that we advocated are that we adjusted when the referral numbers got higher than that per mentor was we started doing group mentoring, because you can do bigger groups that way. And so that way we weren't turning folks away. But we want to stay within 25 per one person. And they were spread out amongst 3 schools. And so they had their days were at different schools during the week. And so the students could depend on when they would be there and when they would be connecting. And then if they had an emergency, they were able to reach out, and a mentor would go. And then also our lead for the program also carried a small caseload herself as well.
Oh, Rebecca, she's
Mhm,
the
yes.
best.
And we have 5 comprehensive high schools, but we also have like 2 or 3 other different special programming that serve high school students. One is a community school. One is also kind of ALE techie type school programming. So, and that probably tallies a little bit over, I'll say 10,000, maybe 10,000 plus students, close to that. All of those connected, maybe a little shy of that.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right, Shane, I'm going to take you off mute. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead, Shane.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Shane Lee. I'm the Director of Training and Special Projects at the Nonviolence Institute. So we'd be one of the community partners. We do work in schools, and sometimes we partner with the sort of mentor authority in our state, which is Mentor Rhode Island, part of Mentor National. But one of the hardest things in implementing in school is sometimes mid-sized to small nonprofits don't have the um, expertise or the staff to take care of the data piece. So a lot of times you've got a school to invite you in, and you're doing all this activity, but you wasn't tracking data, and there's no way to really report out. Sometimes you have a pre and a post, but that's really only judging the person's experience to your training and education components. But it's not really looking over the whole program for maybe implementation year 1 to have some type of report that you can have after it to say this was effective. So like, what's your advice to nonprofits who maybe struggle in this area? Do they have to call in a third party, or how can they at least have a good start to doing better in that area and actually tracking data and having some outcome or effectiveness reports and evaluation?
Very, very good question, man. Thank you for asking that questions. Scarcity of resources is definitely something that, we deal with. I would say a couple of things. There's a couple angles that, depending on the school district, and depending on the level of partnership that school district have with community partners, we've had in our school, our data processing department have evolved over a period of time. So we can pretty much tell them what type of data we're looking at, and they will work with us internally. And we have community partners who are doing the same thing through a data sharing agreement. I don't know if that exists within your school district. If it does, I would actually approach them, even when you talk, and say, hey, can we talk about a data sharing agreement? And then you will outline the specific data points that you're looking for. and then they can share it. If they don't have that mechanism in place, I'll say, Shane, just brainstorming off the cuff and all that stuff. If I knew more about the situation, I probably could talk about it. You have some of your universities that are locally that are around you, and it's very common. Some of those students that are in certain class, like research method class, are looking for project. I also teach it at the local universities, research methods and all of that. And so I always had students who was looking for projects and all of that. So possibly partnering with your local university around those to develop your data gathering system as well as a data evaluation system. And when I approach them with longevity in mind, because if a student, you may have them for a quarter of semester or two. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. But with more information, we could think about it a little bit more.
I just want to build one other question off of Shane's question. When you have community partners that are interested in, I might have a couple of folks that might be really good mentors in the schools. One of the challenge sometimes is how do we get those community members employed by the school system? Are there any special considerations that Spokane had when trying to recruit a group of folks that you wanted to be different than your traditional school staff? And were were there any challenges to getting them into the school system? 'Cause I know sometimes becoming a school employee can be a challenge.
We didn't mean to both laugh at you.
We have a flashback, Shane. That's okay.
Yes.
A few flashbacks.
So
Yeah.
as far as bringing folks in, again, we're very involved in the community. And so we knew through our connections in the community who these specialized folks would be. Oscar, maybe you could talk about the journey with human resources.
Okay. Yep. I could do it. So, James, we did, because of our programming through advocacy, Nicole and a few others was talking about that. Hey, we have individuals who have some things on their background. Well, there's something, if you got certain violence incidents against adults and kids, you can't work within the education system. But for some of the other one who maybe had drug charges, a few other different types of things, we were able to, over a period of years, I'll say, work with our HR department and begin to start talking about strategies and different things that we can bring them into the school system and still adhere to our policy. With that, one of the main things, reason why Nicole and I are smiling, is that when you venture to go down this direction, you have to make sure that the individuals you're working with have developed enough and are able to detach. And this is a hard saying. Many of you gonna know what I'm saying right now, but it's a hard saying. That, like, one of our main credible people, one in particular I'm thinking about, was very much so, him and his family started up a particular sect of a gang here. I mean, he hasn't been banging for a while and everything, but if his name come up, he still got major rapport and he got major clout still if his name pop up. And so even though he's changed his life around, still in the community, he have this optic. And in some cases, when we need somebody to intervene on behalf of a kid, he actually went in there. Wonderful, great. One challenging thing happened is that because of his support in the group, in the community, they decided to throw some kind of birthday party bash to remember. And he was in the mix. And needless to say that we had people in federal government coming to talk with us about participation and stuff. And so I'm speaking in code as much as I can to say that if you're working with the person in particular, and this is how we resolve that, right? That individual couldn't work in the system no more, but he still could work with us. We partnered him with a community partner that works still close with us, and then through special doing agreements from parents and all of that, we're still able to have that person do what they was passionate about. But I can tell you, it was a very tough conversation sitting with an HR rep and sitting with them and saying that I know that you're not involved. We know that you're not involved in it, but you have to understand, you put us in this unique position. discrimination. This is the alternative route that we have to go. And it ended out turning well, but when you're looking to bring those credible messengers and different people in, you need to have extra level of training, and you have to share what they're going to potentially be up against, because there's going to be a lot of people who don't want them in the ed system. A lot of people who couldn't get in are going to be coming for them.
Mhm.
Yep.
Great, great. Gigi has a question next. I'm going to take her off mute.
Okay.
And then we probably have time for one other question after that.
Okay.
And then I'm just going to end us with a couple of announcements before we close at, was it 4:30 Eastern time? So Gigi, go ahead. I think you're off mute and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Dr. Harris for that last set of information. It was very, very helpful, and we've kind of been in situations like that in our work with the Nonviolence Institute and other folks, so that's very timely as well. So thank
Okay.
you. I wanted to appreciate Nicole. First, it's good to see your face. I know we were
Yes.
trying to connect for a couple months. But thank you for clarifying from the start that this is a tier 2 and 3 program. I'm curious to know what your experience has been with partnering with, working in tandem alongside of, distinguishing yourself from tier 1 non-paid mentoring or peer mentoring programs, because it seems like there's a role for all of those things. And we are doing check and connect at the tier 2 and 3, starting to really experiment with that. But we had not thought about bringing in or deepening our relationship with the Mentor Rhode Island, as Shane mentioned, or with Shane and Nonviolence Institute in these ways. So you're really giving me, us, a lot to think about.
So working with existing tier 1 programs. So actually our department is over the volunteer mentors as well. One of the things we did is we actually try not to, I talked about that our folks were called school community specialists. We found that when we were just calling them mentors, they just assumed, again, they're tier 1 volunteer mentors, and well, we don't think that this person has the qualifications, to be able to work with this. And so then we started saying, well, no, they're paid mentors, because we need to have paid mentors to work with kids that exhibit tier 2, tier 3 behaviors. And then, it was still, they couldn't quite get it. And so giving them a new title really helped with that piece as well. I mean, there's a negative to that, is that they liked our title so much that now the school district all the way around
Yeah,
uses
totally.
school-
But it makes sense, because language does help people organize what they're seeing and receiving. And if you're using the same words that mean something different to them, then they're not getting it. So
Yes. Oscar, did you have anything else on that?
No, I think that's right on.
All right. Any last questions for Oscar or Nicole? All right. I don't see any. I'm going to try to switch us back to the slide deck real quick. I have a couple more slides just to share. So this is Dr. Harris's and Nicole's email address. Feel free to reach out, but I would say reach out to me first. Unless Oscar, Nicole, you, whatever. Either way, it works. What was I about to say about them? Oh, I know somebody had asked if you all are going to have access to the recording. Absolutely, we're going to post the recording on our Stop School-Based CVI Approaches resource website. I'm going to share that with you, and a thank you to all the attendees. Very probably, maybe not today, but later this week. But I also want to share with you an upcoming webinar. We're going to have another one on December 19th from 2 to 3:30 Eastern time. Where we're going to be talking about the Safe Passage program. So similarly to the RISE program, where we're going to be piloting kind of the planning and development of RISE programming in some of the schools that are interested in this. And this is definitely more so geared towards stop sites, but other folks can apply as well. But one of the other things that we've been hearing uh, from our schools is that there's a concern around safety going to and from schools. And how do we partner with community organizations to put credible messengers, or as Oscar likes to call them, cultural brokers, in locations where students don't feel safe coming and going from schools? So we're going to have a couple of our community-based partners talk about what Safe Passage program looks like, who to hire, how to use data to identify where these individuals should be placed, how to navigate the connection with schools. Sometimes, as Oscar and Nicole were saying, sometimes the connection between community organizations and schools can be a challenge. And this is going to be, I think a really terrific webinar. We've done this a couple of times with other grant programs, and it's, something that a lot of schools, a lot of community partners say is important, but oftentimes they're not resources or partnerships to think about how do you put these programs in place. So we're very excited about that. Again, if you haven't registered for that webinar, you can click that QR code and do that. Other than that, I think we are good to go. 5 minutes early. Just Oscar, Nicole, thank you so much. You all are just super innovative and thoughtful. You've been able to get a federal grant a number of years ago. You've built off that. You now have a new STOP grant program to support the RISE program. But you all are constantly thinking about the needs of the students. And this type of work also, I know, Nicole, you talked about it a little bit, but it also has created innovative little kind of smaller branches like that girls program. That's really important to making students feel safe and supported in the schools and build this culture of collaboration and support that is essential to getting students in schools and hopefully out of schools safe. So again, thank you so much for your time sharing with us the RISE program with us. And everybody, thank you all for taking an hour and a half out of your day to listen. And again, if this is something that you all are interested in, please, I'm going to put my email in the chat. Please reach out to me and we'll talk about that. All right. Thank you so much, Oscar, Nicole. We'll be in touch. Everyone else, take care. Thank you very much.